Trump's controversial new deportation strategy now has a new address. The notorious CECOT mega jail in El Salvador, started by the Salvadorian President Nayib Bukele. Hello and welcome to The Print. My name is Debdutta, and in this video we discuss all about CECOT, which is Central America's largest prison where Trump is now sending Venezuelan gang members. Here's what happened. Over the weekend, hundreds of deported migrants, most of them allegedly affiliated with the Venezuelan gang Tren de Aragua, landed in El Salvador's brutal prison even as a US federal judge put a hold on these deportations. Among the deportees were 238 individuals who were accused of being part of that gang, along with 23 members of MS-13, which is another gang in Venezuela. The deportations were part of a broader agreement between Salvadoran President Nayib Bukele and the US government, where El Salvador agreed to house these deportees for a fee of $6 million. Bukele gleefully mocked the US government sidestepping federal orders and in a tweet on X wrote, "Oopsie, too late," even as he welcomed the move of helping his allies and making the prison system self-sustainable, along with obtaining vital intelligence to make El Salvador an even safer place. Donald Trump, in response, wrote, "We will not forget." In what has been described as an unusually rare move, the Trump administration invoked the Alien Enemies Act of 1798 for the deportation of these Venezuelan gangs, a law which has been invoked only 3 times in the entirety of US history. Now, the law grants extraordinary powers to detain or remove foreigners who are deemed a threat during wartime. But the Trump administration has not provided evidence that the deportees were involved in the criminal activities in the US. Visuals shared by the Salvadoran government showed deportees tied up and being processed into CECOT, being shaved and dressed in prison uniforms while being placed in overcrowded cells. Now, El Salvador's Center for the Confinement of Terrorism, or CECOT, was opened in January 2023 by the country's president to stop gang violence. Central America's largest prison, it is situated in Tecoluca, which is southeast of the capital San Salvador. Miguel Sarre, who was a former member of the United Nations Subcommittee for the Prevention of Torture, in a 2005 BBC article referred to CECOT as a concrete and steel pit which was designed to dispose of people without formally imposing the death penalty. El Salvador's prison system is infamous for its extreme measures and harsh conditions, and CECOT stands at the heart of that reputation. Prisoners there are reportedly subjected to severe dehumanizing conditions, which include 23.5 hours a day in a cramped, overcrowded cell with little to no access to basic human rights like medical care or visitation. There is no room for rehabilitation, only punishment. The prison has 256 cells and is designed to house up to 40,000 inmates with 156 prisoners in each cell. According to a detailed BBC report, even the frames are made of sharpened metal to prevent prisoners from hanging from it. The facility lacks windows, fans, or air conditioning despite the region's warm temperatures and high humidity all year round. According to reports, prisoners only leave their cells for online hearings or solitary confinement, and each shared cell size remains uncertain. But plans that were reviewed by BBC for the report show that each cell measures around 92.02 square meter, which at full capacity would provide just 0.58 square meter of space per inmate. Now, the International Red Cross recommends 3.5 square meter per prisoner in shared cells. With a lack of regard for basic facilities or human rights, the facility lacks outdoor recreational space and family visits are completely prohibited, which violates international prisoner rights guidelines as well. Moreover, it is heavily secured with advanced entry scanning, a vast surveillance system, and a weapons room. The 57-acre complex includes 8 blocks with 32 cells each and is surrounded by 2 electrified mesh fences, 2 reinforced concrete walls, and 19 watchtowers with a perimeter which stretches a little more than 2 kilometers. President Bukele's so-called iron fist approach to crime is largely responsible for the creation of such a facility. Under a state of emergency that began in 2022, constitutional rights in El Salvador were temporarily suspended, which allowed the government to bypass due process in its crackdown on gang violence. To make matters worse, El Salvador's prison system has long been under strain, with overcrowding and inadequate resources contributing to the dire conditions. According to a report by AP, at least 261 people have died in prison during El Salvador's gang crackdown since Bukele took office in 2019. The report further states that the country's prison population has more than doubled under Bukele's administration, from 36,000 inmates in 2021 to over 11 lakh inmates in 2024. For Bukele, however, the political capital gained from his tough on-crime stance far outweighs these concerns. The prisons are a tool in his broader strategy to present himself as the strongman leader that El Salvador needs to restore order. The recent deal between the Trump administration and El Salvador comes with financial incentives for Bukele. In exchange for housing deported individuals, Bukele's government is receiving $6 million from the US, a payment which is meant to cover the cost of keeping these deportees in the notoriously overburdened prison system. This is beneficial for the right-wing Bukele, who has risen to become Latin America's most popular leader due to his crackdown on gangs, despite having suspended key civil liberties and even facing allegations from the US prosecutors of secretly negotiating with these same gangs. Under the Biden administration, the US Justice Department had accused him of secretly negotiating with the MS-13 gang leaders who were now deported by offering them prison privileges in exchange for reduced homicides. Officials also say that he allegedly helped an MS-13 leader flee the country despite a US extradition request. In 2021, the Treasury Department had also sanctioned members of the Bukele administration for aiding gang leaders, and both he and his officials were named in US indictments. Now, Bukele has dismissed all these reports. Labeling himself as the world's coolest dictator, he is positioning himself as a key regional ally to Trump. He declared that the deportees would be detained for at least a year and would participate in labor and workshops through a program called Zero Idleness. He also referred to the weekend flights as the first of many to come. Bukele worked hard to gain favor with Trump and his allies. He invited Trump's children and key supporters earlier to his inauguration in 2019, and in 2024 even addressed the Conservative Political Action Conference, or CPAC, which is an annual political conference attended by conservative activists and officials from across the US. While Trump criticized Bukele at the Republican National Convention in 2024 for sending criminals to the US, tensions soon eased, and Trump last week praised him for agreeing to the deportation. Last week, Senator Marco Rubio appreciated President Bukele for volunteering to take in the deported migrants and said that he has proven that he is not only the strongest security leader in the region, but also a great friend for the United States. Now, in the US's case, it allows the country to bypass the political and logistical challenges of handling deportees at home. By sending them to El Salvador's prison, the US does not have to deal with their cases in domestic courts or provide them with legal protections. Meanwhile, there was a lot of backlash for the move. The Trump administration faced backlash for continuing the deportation of hundreds of immigrants to El Salvador, despite the federal judge's temporary orders which called for halting the removals on Sunday. However, here's what happened. At the time of the ruling, 2 deportation flights were already in the air. One which was bound for El Salvador and the other for Honduras. Meanwhile, following the deportations, Chief Justice John Roberts, in a rare statement issued on Tuesday, condemned the call to impeach judges who rule against the Trump administration. His statement followed Trump and his allies recently calling for impeaching judges, including US District Judge James Boasberg, who had blocked the deportation of Venezuelan migrants. Trump had criticized Boasberg, stating that the judge should be impeached. Now, the White House defended Trump's actions, claiming that the judge's orders had no lawful basis, since both the planes had already left US soil and that the deportations targeted terrorist TDA aliens. What is TDA? Trendy Aragua began in 2014 in a notoriously lawless prison in Venezuela and emerged alongside the exodus of millions of Venezuelans, most of whom were fleeing the country's economic collapse in search of better living conditions. Venezuela's government issued a statement on Sunday condemning Trump's invocation of the 1798 law, describing it as reminiscent of the darkest chapters in human history, from slavery to the atrocities of Nazi concentration camps. This is Debdutta for ThePrint. Keep watching for more such videos.